Alright guys, welcome back to the video. This is a continuation of the old school audio engineering series where we take old school philosophies and put them in the box. This is the mixing video. So in the last video, we laid down our tracks to virtual tape with all our other virtual plugins. So now we have the output of those plugins. Now you got to remember, it's all about gain staging. That's why these files aren't maximized like this. That's no good. You know, they should still be looking pretty small, these waveforms. You know, so if you want to hear about gain staging in depth, I will link to it in the video description. But for now, we're going to talk about some more plugins that go down while you're mixing. Now, the following plugins would all be on each track out as you're mixing. If you run out of CPU, you need to bounce or render or freeze your track. But it's worth it to put all these plugins on. It might seem a little ridiculous, but again, I've been doing this for about 2 or 3 years now, and my results speak for themselves. So again, even with mixing, we are going to have ARC on the master channel. And I may as well enable that plugin and the tape plugin as well. Some people like to mix with a mix bus compressor. I find that it kind of screws with your mix, you know, and then if you try to do any automation, it's screwing with that too. But there's two different philosophies with that. I just don't like the mix bus compressor being on from the beginning of the mix, but you might want to try it both ways, see what you like better. And okay, so we'll go from there. Now, we have our tape. We have our virtual 2-inch tape. It's going to be mixed. So what do? What did the old school engineers do? They would take the tape machine and feed it into the console inputs of typically a solid state Logic 4000, which lucky for you, we have a plugin that simulates that. So the Slate VCC Brit 4K option has that. Waves also has a plugin called NLS. There's various console emulation plugins. Slate, I think, was the first to do it, and it sounds good and subtle. It's subtle across each track, but the buildup of these tracks is why you want to use it. Now, a lot of times people would push the inputs of the SSL console. You can do that without messing with your volume by using the drive option. This is something you want to listen for. A lot of times I'll just keep it at 0 though. Just like that. But on the drums especially, a lot of times they're pushed. So you might want to try that. But our first, this represents our line input on the console. And then we're going to go on to, this is the British channel from IK Multimedia. This simulates the SSL 4000 EQ. So the board EQ. There's also the SSL, the official solid state Logic plugins from Waves. Those are nice as well. Although the IK is newer, and I think I'm not really sure which ones people like or not. I know a lot of people initially liked the SSL ones from Waves, and then as time moved on, they didn't like them. It's a toss-up, really. You also have Red EQ, which I believe is a Joe Meek EQ. Very nice sounding EQ. It sounds clean, but it still has character to it. It's not as flexible as this plugin, though. Magenta is also an option for a character EQ. So the SSL is kind of a cleaner sounding EQ. And then, oh, by the way, I should have said this. At this point in the mix, your instrument should sound pretty awesome. The old school engineer that I was talking to on a message board said that 90% of the mix would be finished while recording. Now, if you're new to recording, that's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to have to tweak some more, but everything we do here is for the benefit of the final product. So you might not even need to have any more equalizers if you did it right. But once you're doing your mixing, you're probably going to need to mix, within the context of the entire sound, and not just your individual instruments. And if you have to go back and use your original files, then you can do that. But what I like to do is take care of a lot of these, I'm trying to think of the word, basically these maintenance tasks, the task of getting the instrument to sound nice, and housekeeping. There we go. Housekeeping tasks. Also, if you have noise in your chain, you should use something like Isotope RX to clean that up during the quote-unquote virtual recording process, so that now your mixing files don't have noise in them. Also, when you do the virtual recording, you can do a virtual gate. So, like, for example, when this guitar is not playing, you would do this during recording. You could do it now, but I like to have everything in one solid block. Cut, delete, and that'll work as a virtual gate. I think this plugin actually has a gate, which is one reason why the SSL 4000, which was such a nice console, is because you can have so many channels running at the same time and not have it be too noisy. But virtual gating within a DAW is easy. You just go in here and delete. So the idea is that you don't want to have a signal until the instrument's playing, because the instrument playing will cover up the noise. So we have, again, this is our line input. VCC is our line input. And then we have our EQs. This is a DBX emulation of a 16, was it once? Yeah, the 165A. And then this is a Fairchild 1176. Now here we have a delay plugin called Echo Boy, my favorite out of all of the delay plugins. We have a flanger, like a tape flanger, a little cool effect. We have coursing, and we have reverb, all kinds of reverb out there. Now typically this would be on a bus, so we would or ascend really, and then brought back in. So what you would do, let's say you want to do a vocal chain. So I'm going to make a new track. Let's say these are even though this is a guitar track technically, I'll make a new track underneath of it. I'm going to go to my in-out, IO, go to receive, and then go to eGuitar 1, track 2. And then what I'll do is have this plugin on, rename it to, I'll just do a guitar. So eGuitar reverb, and obviously turn the plugin on. And we would make sure this mix knob right here, this is important for any reverb plugin or send effect that you use, is 100% wet. So either it'll say wet or 100%. And what we're going to do is add VCC after this to simulate a line input, because we would be sending the hardware out and then bringing it back in on another console channel. So we would do that. Gain stage, of course. So I'll solo this. See how it's barely going in? So we could try either upping the input. If that's not working, we can add a clean gain. And then once we get it around 0, adjust the fader in your DAW. so it sounds good once you're back into the entire mix. What I like to do though is go through each track, EQ it, solo, EQ, compress, again, getting a little bit more compression. If you watch a video, and I'll link to it below, it's called serial compression. And basically that's kind of what we're doing with these plugins. The tape plugin, the hardware compressor, just subtle amounts of compression, evening out the volume dynamics, makes for a better sounding mix. You know, enough compression that you're evening out the level, but not so much that it's destroying the tonality. That's the idea of a compressor. Because if you have too many dynamics with your tracks, it's hard to hear every instrument. So again, our bus, if you're going to set a bus up, do it like that for the send effect. Now, what you'll do on a typical console is you will have, let's say, your guitars all running into the same bus. So what I'm going to do is make a new track, call this GTR bus, or BS for short, input output, and then I'll just go to receive. Now you might not have this. If you have, some DAWs don't allow receive, so in that case you would need to go to the track you want to send, go to sends, put it to the guitar bus, and then go to each one of these, input output, send, guitar bus. Luckily Reaper has something called receives where you can just select everything on the same menu. So we bus these together. Now this helps with automation levels. We bus these again to a channel with the virtual channel on them. Even though this is called the mix bus, that's for the 2-track, the master channel. Channel is what you should use for the any buses you want to do. And what that does is it combines the 2 signals into one. So the two guitar tracks will be going into one channel. And that gives us a little bit more saturation, hardware analog saturation. And then you would do the same with the drums, the same with a vocal bus. That's typically your buses are vocals and guitars and drums. Those are your 3 typical buses, but you could have buses for other stuff too. Piano, if you have 10 bass guitars like Spinal Tap, 10 bass guitars and going into one bus. So back to the other plugins. So again, this is our chain, and the idea of this is we have the recording, we have the tape, which is our files. So each one of these files is our recording tape. These are being fed into the console line input on Slate VCC. And then these are all our effects per channel. And then anytime we have a typical send effect, we're going to put VCC after that. And finally on our 2 bus, oh, by the way, I should mention, once you do a bus, to properly simulate the bus, you need to set this up from the beginning so it's not too complicated to do towards the end. You need to go to your input output on each track that's being fed to a bus. And under here, this will be different depending on what DAW you use, but you want to remove this from being sent directly to the master. Otherwise, the signal won't go through properly. You're going to basically double your track. You'll have this one playing plus the bus. That's not what you want to do. You want to have everything going just through the bus. So again, take that off the master. Now that should go to the master. The buses should go to the master, but everything feeding the bus should not go to the master track. So if you had a guitar reverb, if this was your actual guitar bus, not just the reverb, then you would send this directly to the 2-track, to the mix bus. But if this was feeding in conjunction with the direct guitars, which I would recommend you do, if you were going to put guitar reverb on. And then this would actually feed into a second area. Here we go. And we'll call this guitar bus. Oh wait, I already had the guitar bus. I'm sorry. So this is actually, yeah, the reverb feeds that. And then we would have, I gotta add the reverb onto the guitar bus. So we have 3 guitar tracks feeding the guitar bus. You guys could figure it out. Just think logically about how a recording console works, or a recording mixer, or I'm sorry, a mixer period. And then everything, oh, I gotta disable the reverb on this. You'll hear it right away if it sounds off. So once I have this going to the bus, then we're good. Now everything's set up right. Okay. Now, our 2-track. We want to simulate a mixing console. So we take VCC, put the console to the same as the mixing console, and then we put a bus compressor. So the FG Gray emulates the SSL 4000 compressor, as does the T-Rax bus compressor. Then finally, after that, we're going to send this to a mixdown tape. So Slate virtual tape machine, Slate VTM, set to the 1/2" 2-track at 15 inches per second on the speed, and our tape type can be whatever you want. For more of a tape sound effect, a classic tape sound, put it on FG 456. And again, we're going to gain stage. So we want to have this right around 0. You don't really want to saturate it too much. I mean, it all depends. If it sounds good, it sounds good. Again, ARC should be on the entire time you're mixing. Because my FX was off, that's why it wasn't working. Okay. And then the last step is we're going to take ARC off and then render our mix to another 32-bit floating point file. And that simulates a mixdown tape that in the old school days would be sent after the mixdown, sent to a mastering engineer. And that'll be the 3rd video and final video in this series. And I'm actually going to go over my notes right now and see if I missed anything for you guys. Okay, I'm not going to get into depth about this. I'm going to actually do a separate video on automation, which is kind of a misnomer. Automation is when you change your effects, whether that be just a simple fader, the EQ, adding more reverb, taking away reverb, you're changing your mix as it goes along. And automation used to be done by hand. Luckily, we can just do this. So let's say I want to automate this. So I'll go to the ENV and then track envelopes. I can do any of these. So I'll do volume. And I'll just go along here, hold shift, click, that adds my point, my handle, and then I can go, let's say I want to raise the volume at this point. So again, holding shift the whole time adds a point, and then click, and then I can come over here, grab this line, drag it up, and my volume fades up starting at this point, and then settles on this level. If I want to bring it down, I add another point, bring this down like that. Automation, it's more complicated than just this, but automation is a key part of having a professional sounding mix. Okay, one other note that I had on my script. Slate Digital will be releasing the virtual mix rack plugin supposedly this year in 2014. This will make this whole process a lot easier because they will have basically a virtual 500 series lunchbox. If you guys ever heard about that, it's basically all these little modules in one, but instead of that, it actually works a lot like their VBC rack plugin. And Waves has something like this as well, but the way this works is, let's say I want to have my EQ first. Well, let's pretend this module right here is the EQ. I can grab this over here, move it up, drop it, and then now my EQ's here, my compressor's here. Let's say I want it to have a reverb, but I want the reverb to be in the other part of the chain. Now you can do this right now with plugins by changing their order like this, but having everything in one plugin will make things a lot easier. And VMR, Slate VMR, is going to feature a Neve 1073 EQ emulation and preamp emulation, a SSL 4000 emulation, so basically the British channel that IK has. And then it's also going to have a 1176 emulation, the compressor, and for the first time in a long time, another compressor that is slightly based on a distressor, which has never been emulated before. So 2 compressors, 2 EQs, 4 mixing, all in one plugin. And then I think eventually they're going to allow you to put VCC in the chain as well, which is going to be pretty cool. So it'll make that all in one plugin and a little bit easier on the clicks. But the cool thing is, once you have something like this set up, you can always mix like this, and you just save a template, project template, save project as template, and then you can recall this. So, you set up drums, you set up what you want for vocals, you set what you want up for guitars. So you always have the plugins you normally use already in your mixing template. And once that's set up, you gain stage, you mix, you use your ears. And again, the last step is recording to tape, virtual tape. And then we move on to mastering. All right, after editing this video, I have a few more points to make that I don't think I was clear enough in the mixing video. You need to make sure that these plugins are on every track, because I only had it on one because I didn't want my computer to melt down while I was doing a screen capture. Again, we're simulating that we already have a mixtape. So that channel, a recorded tape. So that tape will have 16 tracks on it. On a tape machine, you would have 16 outputs, and then those would be fed into either a patch bay or directly into the console. In a big studio, they would have a patch bay, and then that patch bay can either be routed directly into the console's line input, or it could be patched in to a piece of outboard hardware. So if you want to simulate that, you of course would put that first, and then you would put the Slate VCC or Waves NLS or whatever console emulation plugin after that outboard gear. You want to make sure that every track has that console emulation plugin. And the reason I like using VCC is because out of all the console emulation plugins, it's accurate, according to a lot of people who have been mixing on large format consoles throughout the years. And it's very subtle. A lot of people say they can't even hear the difference. It's a very subtle effect, which lends itself to being used across a lot of different tracks. So again, anytime you use a bus, anytime you use a track, put VCC channel on there. And then the only time you use the mix bus plugin, at least the way I work, that goes on as the very first plugin on your master channel. If y'all have any questions about this mixing workflow, then please leave some comments below and I may make another video if there's a lot of questions or if there's something that I forgot to talk about at all that I should have. But yeah, this is possibly a new way of thinking about doing this stuff, but the advantages are you get more of a buildup of that analog tone, and that analog tone translates to a more professional sounding mix, or really a mix that people grew up with, that in my mind sounds better than just simple in the box mixing without using these saturation plugins, because the key to that sound are these saturation plugins. They make a big difference as far as I can hear. You know, I thought they maybe were snake oil at first, but now that I've been using them for a number of years, I'm all about them. So that's about it. Again, if you have questions, please post them below and I may make another video on this topic. Also, in case you're wondering, patch bays are designed to have a clean sound to them, really to not add anything extra to the sound and essentially function as a wire. So they don't really impart the sound that a console mixer would. A console mixer, that's kind of a double, you know. Anyway, the patch bay, I wouldn't worry about it coloring. You know, most of them are not designed for coloring the sound. If they do color the sound, they're broken. So your only concern is that line input on the consoles, because a lot of them have the mic amp in the circuitry, and that's what helps color the sound. That mic amp that may not be on necessarily, but it is affecting the tone in some way. And a lot of these consoles have line drivers or, you know, line trim inputs that do add their own coloration to the sound. So again, don't worry about the patch bay affecting the sound, and you're not getting the whole analog experience. That's not really going to affect your tone in the real world as much, really, to the ear. That again, even the line input of the mixing console is subtle. The buildup is subtle. The biggest impact to me is that mix bus plugin. When it sums all of the tracks together, that mix bus plugin adds its final sound, but the line in the VCC channel, in this case, that adds its own sound as well. Now, your plugin might work differently than VCC, and you'll have to read the manual. So if there's like an option for line in or the bus or whatever, you got to pick that on the plugin. With VCC, it's two different plugins. So anyway, this has been Adam for RealHomeRecording.com.